My wife cheated for 3 years. You'll never find out, she told her lover. On divorce day, I put a folder on the table and said, "Sign this." She had no idea what was inside. It's funny the things you remember. Not the big moments, not the anniversaries or the birthdays, but the small stuff, the quiet stuff. I remember the way the morning light used to hit the quartz countertop in our kitchen, making the little flecks of gray and silver sparkle. I remember the low hum of the refrigerator, a sound so constant it was basically silence. For 10 years, that was the soundtrack to my life with Sarah. 10 years of quiet mornings, the smell of fresh coffee, and the comfortable weight of a life we had built together, brick by brick. A life that felt as solid and real as the heavy oak door on the front of our house. That morning was no different. It was a Tuesday in early fall, the kind of day in Ohio where the air has a little bit of a crisp edge to it, but the sun is still warm on your skin. I was up at 5:30, like always. I'm a project manager for a construction firm, and my brain just works better in the early hours. I had a big presentation coming up, a bid for a new medical center downtown. It was the kind of project that could define a career, and I was pouring every ounce of myself into it. I remember standing there in the kitchen, a blue ceramic mug in my hand, watching the steam rise into the cool air. The house was still. Sarah was a deep sleeper, her breath a soft, rhythmic whisper from our bedroom down the hall. In that moment, everything felt right. Perfect, even. We had the house, the 2 nice cars in the garage, the life everyone dreams of when they're young and dumb and sketching out their future on a napkin. We were the couple people looked at and said, "They made it." I left a note for her on the counter, next to a fresh cup of coffee I'd poured. "Good luck with your presentation today, superstar. Knock 'em dead. Love, Mark." She was in marketing, a senior director at a big firm, and she was just as ambitious as I was. We were a power couple, or so we told ourselves. We supported each other's careers, celebrated the wins, and talked through the losses. At least I thought we did. My day at work was a blur of spreadsheets, blueprints, and endless conference calls. I was so deep in the zone that I almost missed her call around 4 in the afternoon. Her picture popped up on my screen, a photo from our trip to the coast 2 summers ago. She was laughing, her blonde hair whipped across her face by the wind, the ocean a brilliant blue behind her. My heart did a little flip. It always did. "Hey, you," I answered, leaning back in my squeaky office chair. "Hey, honey." Her voice was bright, a little breathless. "Listen, I know this is last minute, but the client meeting went amazing. Like, home run amazing. Mr. Henderson is taking the whole team out to celebrate tonight. A big dinner at the Gilded Lantern. It's a huge deal." "Wow, babe, that's fantastic. See, I told you you'd kill it." I felt a surge of pride for her. The Gilded Lantern was one of those new, ridiculously expensive places downtown that you couldn't get a reservation at for months. I know. But listen, here's the thing. It's going to go late, and it's one of those company-sponsored events, so everyone is taking ride shares. I was wondering, could you possibly come pick me up when it's over? I just feel safer with you. That last line always got me. "Of course, Sarah. Anything for you. Just text me when it's winding down. You're the best. Seriously, it'll probably be around 11 or so. I'll keep you posted. Love you." "Love you too." I hung up the phone with a smile. It was a small thing, picking her up. A husbandly duty. But it felt good to be the one she called. The one she trusted to bring her home safe. I worked for another few hours, my mind buzzing with concrete specs and timelines. but part of me was already thinking about her smile when she'd get in the car, smelling of expensive perfume and success. I packed up my briefcase around 7, my brain feeling like mush. I drove home through the thickening twilight, the streetlights just beginning to flicker on. The house was empty and quiet when I got there. I heated up some leftover lasagna, ate it standing over the kitchen sink while scrolling through the news on my phone, and then settled onto the couch in the den. I put on some sports highlights, but I wasn't really watching. I was just waiting. 10 o'clock rolled around, then 10:30. The sports show ended, and a late-night talk show host started telling jokes I didn't find funny. I checked my phone. Nothing from Sarah. That was okay. These things always run long. I sent a quick text. "Hey, just checking in. Hope you're having a great time." No reply. 11 o'clock came and went. The house felt bigger now, the silence louder. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to be mocking me. I started pacing. From the den to the kitchen, a 10-step loop. I'd look out the big bay window into the dark, empty street, then check my phone again. Nothing. The little bubble next to her name didn't even say read. By 11:30, a knot had formed in my stomach. It wasn't a big, tight knot of panic, not yet. It was a small, cold little thing, a pebble of unease. This was unusual for her. She was always so good about checking in. I called her phone. It rang and rang, the electronic tone echoing in my silent house, before finally clicking over to her voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Sarah. Leave a message." Her voice was so cheerful, so full of life. It felt like a punch to the gut. I tried not to let my mind go to dark places. Car accident, mugging, all the terrible things a husband's mind cooks up when his wife is out of touch. But this was a fancy restaurant in the safest part of downtown, surrounded by her colleagues. It didn't make sense. I called again at 11:45. Straight to voicemail this time. Her phone was off, or the battery was dead. That had to be it. Her battery died. She was so busy celebrating she didn't even notice. It was a perfectly logical explanation. But the cold pebble in my gut was growing, turning into a rock. At 5 past midnight, my phone finally buzzed. It was her. A text. "So sorry. Phone died. We just wrapped up. Can you come get me now? Gilded Lantern." The relief that washed over me was so intense, it made me dizzy. I felt foolish for worrying. Of course her phone had died. I grabbed my keys off the hook by the door, my heart feeling light again. On my way, I texted back and hurried out to the car. The drive downtown took about 20 minutes. The city was quieter now, the traffic thinned out to a handful of late-night travelers. I pulled up in front of the Gilded Lantern. Its entrance was all glass and polished brass, glowing warmly in the dark. There were a few people milling about, waiting for their rides. But I didn't see Sarah. I parked across the street where I could see the entrance clearly and sent another text. "I'm here, out front." 5 minutes passed, then 10. The people who had been waiting were gone now. The doorman was starting to look bored. I called her phone. It rang, so the battery wasn't dead anymore. She must have found a charger inside. It rang and rang, then went to voicemail again. What was going on? The restaurant was clearly closing. A few kitchen staff came out a side door, smoking and talking quietly. The rock in my stomach was back, and it was heavy. I felt a prickle of irritation mixing with the worry. It was after 12:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. I had a massive presentation in less than 48 hours. Why was she making me wait like this? I was just about to get out of the car and go inside when I saw her. She didn't come out the front door. She came from around the corner, from a dark side street that ran alongside the building. She was walking with a man. It was Mr. Henderson, her boss, a tall, silver-haired guy I'd met once or twice at company Christmas parties. He was handsome in a generic, expensive suit kind of way. They were walking slowly. He had his hand on the small of her back. As they stepped into the pool of light from the street lamp, he leaned in and said something in her ear. She threw her head back and laughed. It wasn't her normal laugh. It was different, louder, sharper. He didn't take his hand off her back. My own hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. My breath caught in my throat. I watched as he leaned in again, and for a terrifying second, I thought he was going to kiss her. But he didn't. He just squeezed her shoulder, gave her a little pat, and then turned and walked back down the dark side street. Sarah stood there for a moment, watching him go. She smoothed down her dress, took a deep breath, and it was like she was putting on a mask. Her whole posture changed. The giddy, laughing woman disappeared, and my wife, Sarah, reappeared. She pulled out her phone, looked at it, and then her head snapped up, her eyes scanning the street. She saw my car. She pasted on a bright, tired smile and walked towards me, her heels clicking on the pavement. I felt frozen. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. The hand on her back, the private laugh, the way she came from a side street, not the front door where she told me to meet her. She opened the passenger door and slid in, bringing a gust of cold air and a cloying, sweet perfume with her. It wasn't her usual scent. "Oh my God, I am so sorry," she gushed, leaning over to kiss my cheek. I flinched just slightly. I don't think she noticed. My phone was completely dead, and I had to borrow a charger from someone. And then Henderson just would not stop talking. You know how he is. Cornered me by the coat check. I looked at her. Her face was flushed, her eyes a little too bright. "I thought you said the party just wrapped up." My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Flat. "Well, yeah, the main dinner. But the partners kept a few of us for a nightcap to talk strategy. It was so boring, you would have hated it." She settled back in her seat, buckling her seatbelt. "I'm exhausted. Can we just get home?" I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. My mind was a discordant symphony of her words and what I had seen. Cornered me by the coat check. But I saw her come from the side street, with him, his hand on her back. My phone was dead. But I'd called it, and it rang before going to voicemail. I drove in silence. The 20-minute drive back to our quiet, perfect house felt like an eternity. The silence in the car was different now. It wasn't comfortable. It was heavy, suffocating, filled with unspoken questions. I kept seeing the image of her laughing with him under the streetlight. It was burned into my brain. When we pulled into the garage, she turned to me. "Thanks again for getting me, hon. You're my knight in shining armor." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were just tired. And something else. Something I couldn't name. "No problem," I mumbled. We walked into the house, the same house that had felt so perfect and safe just a few hours ago. Now it felt like a stage, a set for a play, and I suddenly had this sickening feeling that I was the only one who didn't know his lines. She went straight upstairs to get ready for bed. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, in the dark. The quartz countertops weren't sparkling. The hum of the refrigerator wasn't comforting. It was just a low, mechanical, emotionless drone, And for the first time in 10 years, I felt a tremor of doubt shake the very foundation of the life I thought I had. It was a tiny crack, almost invisible, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it was there. And I had a feeling it was only going to get bigger. The next few weeks were a special kind of torment. It's one thing to have a suspicion. It's another thing to live with it, to let it sit in your stomach like a piece of undigested food, making you sick day after day. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was being ridiculous, paranoid. I was stressed about the medical center project. I was tired. I'd seen a harmless, friendly goodnight between a boss and his employee. That's all. I repeated it to myself like a mantra. Harmless, friendly, good night. But my brain, the same brain that could memorize zoning regulations and building codes, wouldn't let it go. It kept replaying that little scene on a loop. The way his hand rested so comfortably on the small of her back. The intimacy of that shared laugh in the dark. The lie about the coat check. The lie about the dead phone battery. Small things. So small you could brush them away like lint off a sweater. But they were sticky. They clung to me. I started watching her. I hated myself for it. Every time I did it, I felt like a lesser man, like I was betraying the very trust that our marriage was built on. But I couldn't stop. It was a compulsion. I'd watch her when she was on her phone, typing furiously with her thumbs, a little half-smile on her face. If I walked into the room, the phone would be flipped screen down on the counter in a heartbeat. "Just texting Jessica," she'd say, a little too quickly. Jessica was her best friend since college, her maid of honor. Of course she texted Jessica. But did she always smile like that when she did? Did she always hide the screen? The late nights at the office started happening more often. Once a week, then twice. Sometimes she'd call, full of apologies. "Honey, we're on a crazy deadline. I'm going to be stuck here for a few more hours. Don't wait up for me." Other times, I'd just get a text. I'd be lying in our king-sized bed, the space next to me cold and empty, and my phone would buzz at 10 p.m. Just leaving now, so tired. I tried to talk to her about it once, gently. We were eating dinner on a Sunday night, a roast chicken I'd spent all afternoon making. It was supposed to be our time, our one guaranteed meal together every week. "You've been working really hard lately," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. She looked up from her plate, a fork full of potatoes halfway to her mouth. "Tell me about it. This new campaign is a monster. Henderson is breathing down everyone's neck." Henderson. The name landed like a stone in the quiet dining room. "Is everything okay with him? With your boss?" I asked, my heart starting to pound. She gave me a strange look, a flicker of something, annoyance, defensiveness, crossed her face before being replaced by a practiced, easy smile. "Yeah, of course. He's tough, but he's fair. Why do you ask?" "I don't know. Just seems like he's demanding a lot of your time outside of normal hours." She put her fork down and reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. Her skin was cool. "Mark, honey, is this about the other night? When you picked me up? I told you he was just giving me a pep talk. He does that with the whole team. You're not worried, are you?" She tilted her head, her expression a perfect performance of loving concern. And I caved. I felt like a fool. What was I going to say? "I saw the way he touched you, and it made my stomach turn inside out." She'd think I was crazy, jealous, controlling. So I did what any man who desperately wants to believe in the woman he loves would do. I backed down. No, of course not," I said, forcing a smile. "Just looking out for you." Don't want you to get burned out." "You're so sweet," she said. And the conversation was over. She had won. She had expertly steered us back into the calm, safe waters of our normal life, leaving me feeling like a paranoid idiot. But the doubt didn't go away. It just went deeper underground. And then, about a month after the night at the Gilded Lantern, I found something that changed everything. It was a Saturday. Sarah was out for the day, a spa day with Jessica, she'd said. I was cleaning out the garage, a task I'd been putting off for months. I was sorting through a pile of old junk on a workbench when I saw it. Tucked behind a rusty can of paint thinner was one of her old purses, a designer bag she hadn't used in at least a year. I was about to toss it in the donation pile when I noticed it felt heavy. On a whim, I opened it up. Inside, amongst the old receipts and dried-up lip balms, was a small, sleek, silver rectangle. It was a burner phone. I stood there in the dusty, sun-drenched garage, my hands covered in grime, holding this thing. It felt alien, dangerous. It didn't belong in our life. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. Why would Sarah need a secret phone? There is only one reason a person in a committed relationship has a secret phone. With trembling fingers, I tried to turn it on. The battery was, unsurprisingly, dead. I ran inside, my mind a blank roar of static. I found a universal charger in my office junk drawer and plugged the phone in. I sat there at my desk, staring at the blank screen, for what felt like a lifetime. After about 10 minutes, it flickered to life. There was no password. My blood ran cold. She was either arrogant or careless, or maybe both. I opened the text messages. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone steady. There were hundreds of them, a long, continuous thread with a single contact saved under the name E. I started reading, and with every word, the world I knew, the life I loved, the woman I married, dissolved into dust. The texts went back years. 3 years. 3 years of secret meetings, of coded language, of shared jokes I wasn't a part of. 3 years of another life she was living when I was at work, or asleep, or sitting on the couch waiting for her to come home. I read about their lunches that were actually afternoons spent in hotel rooms. I read about the business trips that were romantic getaways. I saw how they coordinated their stories, how she would text him to confirm what lie she had told me. "Told Em I'm with Jessica tonight. See you at 8. "Make sure you don't mention the conference in Napa. I told him it was in Sacramento." And then I saw the name, the full name. In one of the texts, she'd written, "Ethan Henderson is a genius for thinking of this." Ethan, Mr. Henderson, her boss, the man who had his hand on her back. The man she swore was just her demanding but fair boss. I felt a wave of nausea so profound, I had to put my head between my knees. I was going to be sick. The betrayal was absolute. It wasn't just a physical affair, it was a conspiracy. She and her boss, for 3 years. My 10-year marriage, our perfect life, it was all a lie. A carefully constructed, elaborate lie. I kept scrolling, my eyes burning with tears I refused to let fall. I was looking for something, anything, to make it stop. But it only got worse. I found the text, the one that would become the mantra of my own personal hell for the next few months. It was a conversation from about a week ago. "E, are you sure he doesn't suspect anything?" He seemed tense at the company picnic. "Sarah, Mark? No way. He's too trusting. Too simple. He builds things. He doesn't see what's right in front of him. You'll never find out. He'll never find out. I've got him completely snowed." He'll never find out. The words echoed in the silent room. He'll never find out. The arrogance, the condescension, too simple. I thought about all the times I'd worked late to provide for us, all the weekends I'd spent fixing things around the house, all the simple, trusting love I had poured into our marriage. And this is what she thought of me. I was just a simple, trusting fool who was easy to deceive. Something inside me broke in that moment. The part that loved her, the part that would have forgiven almost anything, it just shattered. And in its place, something cold and hard began to form. It wasn't hatred. It was colder than that. It was a purpose. I didn't smash the phone. I didn't throw things. I didn't get overwhelmed by a need for a stiff drink. I calmly took my own phone out of my pocket, and with a steady hand that surprised me, I began to take pictures of every single screen of text messages. Every date, every lie, every term of endearment she had sent to him. I documented everything. Then I went further. I logged into our shared online banking portal. We had a joint checking account, joint savings, a joint investment portfolio. I was the one who managed the finances. She always said she found it boring. Now I knew why. She didn't have to pay attention because she had another plan. I started going through the statements, line by line, for the last 3 years. It took hours. But my project manager brain, the part of me she called simple, kicked into high gear. I noticed patterns. Small, regular withdrawals from ATMs near a hotel downtown I knew she never went to for work. Regular payments to a credit card I didn't recognize. And then I found the big one. A series of transfers from our joint investment account to a separate account I had no knowledge of. Tens of thousands of dollars, moved in chunks over the last 18 months. It was careful, methodical. It was theft. My grief and heartbreak were being slowly consumed by a cold, white-hot rage. This wasn't just a betrayal of my heart. It was a betrayal of our entire life. They weren't just cheating on me. They were robbing me. They were using my hard-earned money, the money I was saving for our future, to fund their secret life. By the time I heard her car pull into the driveway, it was dark outside. I had a mountain of evidence. I had photos of the texts. I had spreadsheets I'd created tracking the missing money. I had put the burner phone back in the old purse, tucked it behind the paint can in the garage, exactly where I found it. I had wiped my face, calmed my breathing, and arranged my features into a mask of placid normality. She came in, smelling of lavender and chamomile from her spa day. She kissed me on the cheek. "Hey, honey, how was your day?" she asked, her voice light and breezy. I looked into the eyes of the woman I had loved for a decade, the woman who had been my entire world. And I saw a stranger, a very convincing, very beautiful stranger. It was quiet, I said, my voice perfectly even. Productive. I got a lot done. She had no idea. She smiled, believing me, believing in her own deception. You'll never find out. That's what she told him. In that moment, looking at her smiling, unsuspecting face, I made a promise to myself. Oh, I would find out. I would find out everything. And when the time was right, she would know that I knew. I wasn't going to be simple Mark anymore. I was going to be the project manager of her destruction, and I was going to plan it down to the very last detail. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. It was like living as a ghost in my own home. I was there, but I wasn't. I ate at the same table, slept in the same bed, had the same mundane conversations about who was going to pick up the dry cleaning. But the man Sarah was talking to wasn't her husband anymore. He was an actor, playing the part of a loving, slightly oblivious man she called Mark. and I was getting very, very good at my role. Every smile I gave her felt like a lie. Every "I love you," I mumbled back when she said it felt like ash in my mouth. There were times I would look at her across the dinner table, laughing about something that happened at her office, and the urge to just scream, to throw the plate of food against the wall and demand to know how she could do this, was so overwhelming I had to grip the edge of the table to keep myself steady. But I didn't. Cold, calculated purpose had replaced my impulsive anger. An explosion would be satisfying for a moment, but it would give her control. It would allow her to play the victim, to twist the narrative. No, my revenge wouldn't be a fiery explosion. It would be a quiet, systematic demolition. I was a builder, after all. I knew how to take things apart just as well as I knew how to put them up. My days were split into two realities. At work, I threw myself into the medical center project with a ferocity that impressed my bosses. I worked longer hours, my focus sharper than ever. It was a relief to deal with concrete problems, with things like load-bearing walls and HVAC systems. Things that were logical and followed rules. My nights, however, were spent in the dark, secret world of my investigation. After Sarah would fall asleep, her breathing soft and even beside me in our bed, a sound that used to bring me comfort and now filled me with a quiet rage, I would slip out and go to my home office. I closed the door, the soft click of the latch sounding like a vault sealing me in. This was my war room. I hired a private investigator, a man named Mr. Graves, a former police detective with tired eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. I met him in a drab, anonymous coffee shop halfway across town. I didn't tell him the whole story. I just said I had suspicions about my wife's financial activities and potential infidelity with a business partner. I gave him the name Ethan Henderson. I gave him the make and model of Ethan's car, information I'd found through a public records search. I paid him in cash from a new bank account I'd opened, one Sarah knew nothing about. The first report from Mr. Graves came a week later in a plain manila envelope slipped under my office door. I waited until 2 in the morning to open it. Inside were photographs. High-resolution, time-stamped photographs. Sarah and Ethan, having lunch at an out-of-the-way bistro, holding hands across the table. Sarah and Ethan, getting into his car in the parking garage of her office building, her looking over her shoulder before she got in. And the one that made my vision go blurry, a picture of them standing outside a hotel, the same hotel I'd seen on the bank statements, kissing. It wasn't a friendly peck on the cheek. It was a deep, passionate kiss, the kind a husband hadn't received in a very, very long time. I didn't cry. I just felt a profound, bottomless emptiness. The photographic proof changed something. It moved the betrayal from the abstract world of text messages into the stark, undeniable reality of the physical world. This was real. It was happening. I also contacted a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but the best, most ruthless divorce attorney in the state, a woman named Sharon Glass. Her reputation preceded her. They called her the Shark. Our first meeting was in her corner office overlooking the city. It was all chrome and black leather, cold and intimidating. I walked in and laid it all out. The burner phone, the texts, the bank statements, the spreadsheets I had made tracking every dollar. When I finished, she looked at me from across her vast mahogany desk. "Mr. Davies," she said, her voice calm and sharp as a scalpel. "Most clients come in here with tears and suspicions. You've come in with a prosecution-ready case. What is it you want?" "I want to be protected," I said, my voice steady. "I want to secure the assets I built. And I want this to be over, but on my terms. I don't want a long, messy fight. I want a swift, quiet execution. She gave a small, approving nod. You continue to gather your evidence. Do not let her know you suspect a thing. The more rope she has, the more thoroughly she will hang herself. We will wait for the perfect moment to act. In the meantime, we will prepare. So I lived the lie. For 4 more months. 4 months of fake smiles and hollow conversations. I learned things about myself I never knew. I learned I had an incredible capacity for deception. I became a master of the casual question, the offhand comment designed to trip her up, to get her to add another brick to the wall of her lies. One night she came home late, claiming she'd been at a team-building event at a bowling alley. It was so cheesy, she said, rolling her eyes as she kicked off her shoes. But you have to show up for these things. I knew from Mr. Graves that she had been at a 5-star restaurant with Ethan Henderson. He had sent me a photo of them clinking glasses of sparkling cider. Oh, that sounds fun, I said, my voice dripping with fake sincerity. Who won? You're usually a terrible bowler. She hesitated for just a second. A tiny, almost imperceptible pause. Oh, Jessica's team. She was on fire tonight. She had woven her best friend into the lie. I made a mental note. Jessica was complicit. The most difficult part was the physical intimacy, or the lack of it. It had dwindled over the last couple of years, something I had attributed to stress and busy schedules. Now I knew the truth. She would sometimes make an effort, a half-hearted attempt to maintain the illusion. I would make excuses, a headache, exhaustion from work. The project was killing me, I'd say. Every time I pulled away from her, I felt both a sick guilt and a grim satisfaction. I was denying her the one thing that would have assured her she was still in control. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place by accident. One weekend, Sarah had to take my SUV because her sedan was in the shop. She was going to a charity fundraiser, an all-day event. Before she left, I activated the small, discreet audio recorder I had bought online and tucked it under the passenger seat. It was a gray area, legally, but Sharon Glass had advised me that in our state, as long as one party in the car, me, the owner, consented to the recording, it was admissible. It was a long shot, but I was desperate. When I got the car back, I waited until the dead of night, took the recorder to my office, and plugged it into my laptop. I put on my headphones and started listening. It was mostly hours of radio and road noise. I was about to give up when I heard it, her voice. She was on the phone, using the car's hands-free system. I know, she was saying. Her voice was different, annoyed, weary. I have to keep up appearances. The fundraiser is the perfect cover. Then I heard his voice, tinny through the car speakers, but unmistakably Ethan Henderson. Is he still clueless? And then she said it, the words that would seal her fate. Completely. I told you he's a good man, but he's not built for this kind of game. He sees a nail, he wants to hit it with a hammer. He doesn't see the intricate stuff, the long con. There was a pause. Listen, that final transfer from the investment account should clear by Tuesday. Once it does, we'll have enough to put the down payment on the new firm's office space. Another 6 months of playing the devoted wife, and I'm out, free and clear. And he'll be so blindsided, he'll probably agree to whatever I ask for in the settlement just to make the pain go away. I sat there in the dark, the headphones clamped over my ears, and I felt nothing. The rage was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was a profound, icy calm. She wasn't just cheating. She was orchestrating a full-scale exit strategy, funded by my money, built on the assumption of my emotional collapse. He'll be so blindsided, he'll agree to whatever I ask for. I saved the audio file. I made a transcript. I printed it out. The next day, I went to the office supply store. I bought the most expensive, professional-looking black leather folder I could find. Over the next week, I assembled the package. I printed the best of Mr. Graves's photos in high gloss. I printed the bank statements, highlighting every suspicious transaction in yellow. I printed the complete, unabridged transcripts of the burner phone texts. And on the very top, right after the cover page, I placed the transcript of the conversation she had in my car. I even highlighted her own words. He'll be so blindsided. The folder was almost 2 inches thick. It was heavy. It felt like the weight of 3 years of lies. I called Sharon Glass. "It's time," I said. The plan was set. I spent the next 2 weeks going through the motions, a dead man walking. I was polite. I was kind. I was the perfect, simple husband. On the final night, she came and sat next to me on the couch, putting her head on my shoulder. "You've been so distant lately," she said softly. "Is everything okay with the project?" I looked at the TV, not at her. "It's almost over," I said, and I meant it. The morning of the divorce, I woke up before the alarm. The sky outside was a pale, washed-out gray. It was raining, a slow, steady drizzle that matched the cold calm in my chest. Sarah was still asleep, oblivious. I watched her for a moment, the rise and fall of her shoulders with each breath. It was like looking at a photograph of someone I used to know. The emotional connection was completely severed. All that remained was the task ahead. I got up, showered, and put on a suit. Not one of my usual work suits, but the dark charcoal one I saved for important meetings or funerals. I went downstairs and made coffee, the routine a small comfort in the seismic shift that was about to occur. The thick black leather folder was on the kitchen counter, right where I had left it. It looked ominous in the dim morning light. I had told her the day before. I kept it simple, devoid of emotion. "Sarah, we need to talk. I've contacted a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce." The reaction was a masterclass in manipulation. First, the shock. Her jaw literally dropped. Then came the tears, big, theatrical tears that rolled down her cheeks. Then the bewildered questions. What? Why? Where is this coming from? Is it the project? Are you stressed? We can work through this, Mark. We can go to counseling. Don't throw away 10 years over nothing. I just stood there, a rock against her tidal wave of feigned emotion. "There's nothing to work through," I said, my voice flat. "I've scheduled a meeting for tomorrow morning at 9. We'll meet here, at the house. My lawyer will be present via video call. I suggest you have yours there too." She had stared at me, her mind clearly racing, trying to figure out the angle. She couldn't, because in her world, I was the simple man. I was the one who would be blindsided, not the one doing the blindsiding. "Fine," she'd finally spat, her victim act turning to anger. "Fine, if this is what you want." Now that morning, she came downstairs dressed in a sharp, black business dress, her face a carefully composed mask of wrong dignity. She looked like a woman preparing for a corporate negotiation, not the end of her marriage. She didn't speak to me, just poured herself a cup of coffee and stood by the window, looking out at the rain. At 9 o'clock sharp, my laptop, which I had placed at the head of our large dining room table, chimed. Sharon Glass's face appeared on the screen, crisp and professional. "Good morning, Mark," she said. "Good morning, Sharon," I replied. Sarah sat down opposite me, placing her own laptop on the table. A few moments later, her lawyer, a harried-looking man named Frank, appeared on her screen. The stage was set. Our dining room, the place where we'd hosted Thanksgiving dinners and celebrated birthdays, had become a sterile, virtual courtroom. Frank cleared his throat. "All right, let's get started. My client, Sarah, is obviously very distressed by this sudden and unexpected turn of events. She is, however, prepared to discuss an amicable separation. We'd like to begin by addressing the division of primary assets, starting with the house." He started to drone on about property values and equity. Sarah sat there, looking stern and sad, playing her part perfectly. I let him talk for about 5 minutes. I let them establish their narrative, the story of the poor, abandoned wife being cast aside by her emotionally distant husband. I watched Sarah's face. There was no sadness in her eyes. There was calculation. She was already mentally spending her half of the money. When her lawyer paused to take a breath, I spoke. "That won't be necessary," I said. The 2 lawyers and Sarah all looked at me. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of the rain against the window. I reached for the black leather folder. I placed my hand on it, feeling the weight of the secrets inside. I looked directly at Sarah. Her expression was one of mild curiosity, perhaps a little annoyance at being interrupted. She had no idea. No idea at all. I slowly, deliberately, pushed the folder across the polished wood of the table. It slid smoothly, coming to a stop directly in front of her. "Before we discuss the division of anything," I said, my voice low and steady, "I need you to sign this." She looked down at the folder, then back up at me, a confused frown on her face. "What is this? The divorce papers? Frank is supposed to review everything first." "It's not the divorce papers," I said. "It's a post-nuptial agreement, a final settlement offer. Sign it, and we can be done with this today. No mess, no fuss. You walk away with your personal belongings and a small, one-time payment. I keep the house, the savings, the investments, everything." Her lawyer started sputtering through the laptop speaker. "That's an outrageous proposal. It's completely unacceptable. We will not even consider—" "Let him finish, Frank," Sarah said, her eyes narrowed at me. She was intrigued. She thought this was some clumsy, emotional power play. She still thought she was in control. "Why on earth would I sign something like that, Mark?" she asked, a smirk playing on her lips. "Open the folder, Sarah," I said quietly. She held my gaze for a long moment, then looked down. With a sigh of theatrical exasperation, she reached out and opened the cover. I will never, for as long as I live, forget the look on her face in that moment. It's burned into my memory more vividly than any photograph. I watched her read the first page, the transcript of her phone call with Ethan in my car. I saw her eyes scan her own words. He'll never find out. He'll be so blindsided. The color drained from her face. It was instantaneous. 1 second she was a confident, powerful woman in a black dress, and the next she was a ghost. Her mouth fell open slightly. Her hand started to tremble as she flipped to the next page, and the next. She saw the photographs of her and Ethan kissing outside the hotel. She saw the bank statements with the highlighted transfers. She saw page after page of her own secret text messages, her lies and deceptions laid out in cold, black and white print. The room was utterly silent. Her lawyer, on the screen, was squinting, trying to see what she was looking at. "Sarah, what is it?" She didn't answer him. She couldn't. She just kept flipping the pages, her breathing becoming shallow and ragged. It was the sound of a person's world collapsing in on them in real time. The mask didn't just crack. It disintegrated. The powerful executive, the wronged wife, the master manipulator. They all vanished. All that was left was a terrified woman who had been caught, utterly and completely caught. She finally looked up at me. Her eyes were wide with a terror I had never seen before. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't remorse. It was the pure, primal fear of an animal caught in a trap. "How?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I leaned forward slightly. "You told him I was simple, Sarah," I said, my voice still quiet but carrying the weight of all the pain she had caused. "You said I didn't see the intricate stuff. But you forgot what I do for a living. I build things. And I know that before you can build something new, you have to do a thorough survey of the site. You have to know every detail of the ground underneath you. For the last 6 months, I have been surveying the ground of our marriage. And this," I tapped the folder, "is my report." My lawyer's voice cut in, sharp and final. "The offer is on the table. You can sign the agreement, and this all remains a private matter between the 4 of us. Or you can refuse, in which case we will proceed with a contested divorce. This folder and all its contents will be filed as evidence in open court. We will also be filing a separate civil suit against both you and Mr. Ethan Henderson for the recovery of misappropriated funds. And I imagine the local news would be very interested in a story about a senior marketing director and her boss embezzling from her simple husband. The choice is yours." Sarah's head snapped towards her laptop. "Frank?" she pleaded. But what could he say? He was staring, slack-jawed. He knew he was beaten. I just sat back and waited. I watched the war happening inside her. I saw the fight drain out of her, replaced by a desperate, panicked resignation. She picked up the pen that I had placed beside the folder. Her hand was shaking so violently she could barely hold it. She looked at me one last time, her eyes begging for... what? Mercy? Forgiveness. There was none left to give. She signed the paper. Her signature, usually a confident, flowing script, was a jagged, broken scrawl. As soon as she was done, Sharon said, "Thank you. My office will courier the official documents for your signature this afternoon. This meeting is over." Her screen went black. Sarah's lawyer mumbled something and disconnected. And then it was just the 2 of us, in the silent dining room. The rain had stopped. She pushed the folder back towards me. She stood up, her movements stiff and robotic. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just looked empty, defeated. "I'm going to pack a bag," she said to the empty air, and walked out of the room. I sat there for a long time, staring at the folder. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I just felt quiet. The roaring storm that had been inside me for months had finally passed, leaving behind a vast, clean, desolate silence. An hour later, she came downstairs with a single suitcase. She walked to the front door without looking at me. She opened it, and for a moment, she paused on the threshold, her back to me. "For what it's worth," she said, her voice a hollow echo of the one I once loved. "I am sorry." "I know," I said. And the sad part was, I believed her. She wasn't sorry for the cheating or the lies or the stealing. She was sorry she got caught. Then she walked out, closing the heavy oak door behind her, the final soft click sealing the end of our life together. I was alone in the quiet house. My house. And for the first time in a very long time, the silence didn't feel heavy or threatening. It just felt like a beginning. The click of the door was so final. It was a sound I knew well, the sound of the deadbolt engaging. But this time it felt different. It wasn't locking the world out. It was sealing me in. Alone. I stood there in the entryway, my hand still resting on the dining room table, my fingers inches from the heavy black folder. The silence that rushed in to fill the space she'd left behind was immense. It wasn't just an absence of her voice. It was an absence of 10 years of expectation, of habit, of a life I now knew was a performance. For the first few minutes, I didn't move. I just listened. I listened to the house breathe. The low hum of the refrigerator, the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, the distant drip of the rain from the eaves outside. These were the sounds of my life now. The real sounds, stripped of the fiction. Slowly, I straightened up. My body felt stiff, like I'd been holding one position for months. And in a way, I had. I had been braced for impact, and now the crash was over. I was just a man standing in the wreckage. I picked up the folder. It felt lighter now, its purpose served. I didn't open it. I never wanted to see its contents again. I walked into my office and placed it in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, behind the files for old, completed projects. I locked the drawer and put the key in the back of my desk. A tomb for 3 years of lies. Then I started to walk. I went from room to room, a tourist in my own home. Everything was the same, but different. The 2 coffee mugs in the drying rack by the sink, one blue, one a cheerful yellow, looked like a sad little monument. The throw blanket she loved, the one with the tassels, was still crumpled on the arm of the sofa where she'd sat last night. In the living room, the wedding photos on the mantelpiece seemed to mock me. There we were, 2 smiling, happy strangers, 28 years old, with no idea what was coming. I took each one down, one by one, and placed them face down on the coffee table. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away yet. But I couldn't look at them either. The hardest part was the bedroom. Our bedroom. It smelled of her. A faint, lingering scent of her perfume and the lotion she used. Her side of the bed was still unmade from this morning, the indentation of her head on the pillow. Her nightstand had a half-empty glass of water and a novel with a bookmark sticking out, marking a place she would never get back to. I opened her closet. Rows of her clothes hung there, a vibrant collection of colors and fabrics. Dresses for parties I now knew were lies. Blouses for work meetings that were trysts. For the first time since I found that burner phone, a wave of real, gut-wrenching grief hit me. It wasn't for the woman who walked out the door. It was for the woman I thought I had married. The woman who maybe never existed at all. The cold, hard purpose that had sustained me for months was gone, and the pain underneath was raw and exposed. I didn't cry. I just stood there, breathing in the scent of her, and felt the full weight of the 10 years I had lost. I couldn't sleep in that room. Not tonight. I grabbed a pillow and a blanket and went downstairs to the den. I lay on the couch, staring into the darkness, the sports highlights from what felt like a lifetime ago playing in my head. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face when she opened the folder. The shock, the terror. And I felt a sliver of something ugly and satisfying that made me feel ashamed. But then I would hear her voice from the recording, cool and condescending, talking about the long con, and the shame would vanish, replaced by that cold, hard emptiness. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a locksmith. A friendly young man came within the hour and changed every lock on the house. When he handed me the new set of keys, they felt solid and real in my palm. They were keys to my house. Not ours. My house. The second call was to a charity that did home pickups for donations. I scheduled them to come in 2 days. Then I began to pack. I went back into the bedroom, the morning light making the task feel less like grieving and more like a job. I bought a dozen large cardboard boxes from a hardware store. I started with her closet. Methodically, I took every dress, every pair of shoes, every scarf, and folded it, placed it in a box. I tried to be a machine. No emotion, just a task that needed doing. But it was impossible. My hands would touch a silk blouse, and I'd remember her wearing it to my company's award dinner, her hand on my arm, smiling for the cameras. A complete fabrication. I found the dress she wore the night I proposed. I held it for a long time before putting it in a box destined for a stranger. I cleared out her nightstand, her dresser drawers, the bathroom cabinets, bottles of perfume, makeup, jewelry. I put her expensive jewelry, the things I had bought her for anniversaries and birthdays, into a separate, smaller box. Sharon had told me she was entitled to her personal effects, and these counted. The rest, the clothes, the shoes, the everyday clutter of her life, was going to charity. It was a cleansing, a purge. By the time I was done, the room felt sterile, anonymous. Half of it was just empty space, an empty closet, empty drawers, an empty side of the bed. It was stark and lonely, but it was honest. The call from Jessica came that afternoon. I saw her name on my phone screen and my stomach tightened. I almost didn't answer, but some part of me wanted this confrontation. Mark? Her voice was tentative. Sarah called me. She's a mess. She told me what you did. What I did? I replied, my voice dangerously calm. What exactly did she say I did? She said you threw her out, that you blindsided her with divorce papers for no reason. Mark, what is going on? She's my best friend. I've never seen her like this. I could have screamed. I could have unleashed all the venom and fury I had. Instead, I remembered my new role, the project manager. Calm, factual. Jessica. Was she also a mess on the nights she told me she was with you, when she was actually with Ethan Henderson in a hotel room? You should ask her about that. Or maybe you already know. Maybe you were the one helping her pick out what to wear. There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. I had hit a nerve. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she realized how much I knew. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. But the lie was weak, pathetic. You do, I said, and I felt a cold satisfaction in it. So, let me give you a piece of advice. Stay out of it. This is between me and her. You were her accomplice in the lie, but you don't have to be an accessory to the fallout. I hung up the phone before she could reply. I blocked her number. Another tie severed. Another piece of the old life scrubbed away. The next few weeks were a blur of logistics and quiet, painful adjustments. The charity came and emptied the boxes, leaving my house lighter, emptier. I told my parents. My mom cried. My dad was stoic and angry on my behalf. I gave them the simplest version of the truth. She had an affair. It's over. I couldn't bring myself to tell them the depth of the deception, the financial betrayal. It was too humiliating. It made me feel like the simple fool she believed I was. Sharon Glass handled everything with terrifying efficiency. The official papers were signed, filed. The civil suit against Sarah and Ethan was officially lodged. The company they both worked for, a massive, image-conscious corporation, acted swiftly once they were served with a preliminary notice. Sharon got a call from their corporate legal department within a week. An internal investigation was launched. 2 weeks after Sarah walked out my door, I got an email from Sharon with a short, simple message. Subject: Henderson. Update: he's been terminated. His entire department is being restructured. It seems they don't appreciate their senior staff engaging in embezzlement and fraud. I felt a surge of victory, but it was hollow. It didn't fix anything. It didn't give me back my years. It was just consequence. Justice, I guess. But justice didn't feel as good as I thought it would. I wondered what happened to them. To Sarah and Ethan. Was he angry at her for getting caught? For blowing up his career? Was she with him? Did he take her in, now that she had no house and only a tiny settlement to her name? Their entire affair was built on stolen moments and stolen money. I couldn't imagine it would survive the harsh light of unemployment and public shame. I got my answer about a month later. It was a Thursday night. I was driving home from the office after putting in another 12-hour day on the medical center project. It was my refuge, my sanctuary of logic and order. I took a different route home, trying to avoid a traffic jam on the freeway. It took me through a less prosperous part of town, an area of strip malls and budget motels. And that's when I saw them. His car, a high-end sedan that I recognized from Mr. Graves's photos, was parked in the lot of a place called the Starlight Inn, a rundown motel with a flickering neon sign. And they were standing beside it, illuminated by the sickly yellow glow of a parking lot light. They were arguing. I slowed my car, my heart pounding, and pulled over to the curb about 50 yards away, my headlights off. I could see them clearly. He was yelling, his arms waving wildly. She was standing there, looking small and defeated, holding a purse. It wasn't the passionate, thrilling secret romance from the text messages. It looked cheap, sordid, desperate. He got into his car, slammed the door, and sped out of the parking lot, leaving her standing there alone under the flickering sign. She stood there for a long time, then slowly turned and walked back toward one of the motel room doors. I should have felt triumphant, the perfect cinematic revenge. But I just felt sad, profoundly, deeply sad. For her, for me, for the whole sorry mess. I put my car in drive and went home. The day of the big presentation for the medical center finally came. I had been working towards this for the better part of a year. It was the biggest project of my career. I stood in front of the board of directors, the city planners, the hospital administrators. I walked them through the blueprints, the timelines, the budget. I spoke with a confidence I didn't know I possessed. The cold, calculated focus I had used to dismantle my marriage, I now poured into my work. And it was flawless. I knew every number, every potential problem, every solution. When I finished, the room was quiet for a moment. And then the head of the board, an older man with kind eyes, smiled. "Mr. Davies," he said, "that was one of the most thorough and impressive proposals we have ever seen." We got the contract. It was a huge victory. My colleagues slapped me on the back. My boss shook my hand with genuine admiration. I should have been ecstatic. And I was pleased. I was proud. But as I drove home that evening, the victory felt like it belonged to a different person. It was my success, mine alone. There was no one to call and share the news with. No one waiting at home to celebrate with me. The win was real, but it underscored the emptiness of the life I now had to build to put it in. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my friend Dave. Dave was my buddy from before Sarah. We'd been roommates in our early 20s. But as my life got more entangled with Sarah's world of corporate parties and couple friends, I'd seen less and less of him. He was a carpenter. He worked with his hands. He was, as Sarah had once dismissively put it, a simple guy. "Mark, man, is that you?" he answered, his voice full of surprise. Yeah, it's me, I said, feeling a little awkward. Listen, I know it's been a while. I'm going through some stuff. Sarah and I split up. Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that. You okay? There was no judgment in his voice, just simple concern. I will be, I said. Hey, are you busy this weekend? I was wondering if you wanted to grab a coffee or something. Coffee's for office guys, he laughed. I'm rebuilding the deck on my back porch. Why don't you come over? I could use an extra pair of hands. I'll buy the pizza. So I went. I spent all of Saturday at his small, cluttered happy house. We didn't talk much about Sarah. I just told him it was a bad ending. He just nodded and handed me a hammer. We worked all day under the sun, measuring boards, sawing wood, driving nails. The physical labor was cleansing. The smell of sawdust, the satisfying thud of the hammer, the ache in my muscles at the end of the day. It was real. It was tangible. At dusk, we sat on the half-finished deck, drinking sodas and eating pizza out of a cardboard box. We talked about old times, about fishing trips and dumb mistakes we'd made as kids. We didn't talk about investment portfolios or marketing campaigns. It was simple. It was uncomplicated. Driving home that night, my body tired and my mind quiet, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a very long time. It wasn't happiness. Not yet. It was something smaller, more fragile. It was peace. The house was still quiet when I got home. The space in the bed was still empty. But it didn't feel like a void anymore. It just felt like a space. A space that, someday, I might be able to fill with a life of my own making. A life built not on lies or pretenses, but on something solid, something real, like a well-built house on a firm foundation. I knew it would take time, a long time. But for the first time, I believed it was possible.